Hello and welcome. Jettatura here. In my previous video, I went over proficiencies and expertise and how they were calculated while talking about the sleight of hand skill. It got me thinking, what do all the ability scores actually affect in Baldur's Gate 3? I will go over each stat individually and all the things they affect, as well as the skill checks or saving throws they enhance. I should mention that saving throw proficiencies are determined by the class you choose. For example, the rogue starts with intelligence and dexterity saving throw proficiencies. This just means they are more likely to save against whatever is causing them to roll for that saving throw if it targets dexterity or intelligence, as they add the proficiency bonus to the saving throw. Strength. In Baldur's Gate 3, this will come in handy more than tabletop D&D, at least in my experience. There are plenty of things around to lift or move about using your strength stat in the game. This stat also determines your damage for most weapons, though depending on the weapon type, such as finesse weapons, ranged weapons, or abilities you may have, you may use another stat to calculate damage and accuracy, though normally the game will account for which stat of the two you have higher in those cases. An interesting thing to note is that barbarian strength checks in cutscenes visually differ from regular strength checks and often have advantage. For example, though both strength checks succeed, the barbarian effortlessly tosses an object across the room, while a different class can still succeed the check but move the object about less impressively. The primary skill that strength affects is athletics. The higher your strength, the further you jump, and the easier it is to lift or throw things. In fact, if your strength score is too low, you cannot even pick up barrels of oil to place into your inventory. The size of your character can also determine the effect strength has. There are spells to increase your size to that of a large creature, which can double your carrying capacity and make it easier to push or lift objects and creatures. By default, smaller creatures such as goblins can also be picked up and thrown as long as you're playing a medium-sized character or larger. Most of the races by default are medium, though there are a few that are smaller. Strength saving throws can be used to keep an enemy from pushing you in combat as a small example. I doubt they'll add swimming, but strength saving throws can also be used to determine resisting the currents. There are other examples I'm sure of in the game itself, like resisting being rooted by skills such as Ensnaring Strike, or using your strength score to assist in climbing some difficult terrain. One last thing before I move on to other ability scores. Strength also determines how much loot you can hold in your inventory, as it affects your carry weight. Next up is Dexterity, the favorite ability score of rogues and sometimes rangers, though it is important for almost all classes as it affects your armor class. Armor class affects your ability to avoid damage, and Dexterity is sometimes helpful in increasing this score. Other things affect it as well though, such as the type of armor you wear, or the spells you may have cast on yourself like the Mage Armor spell. Back to the ability score though. Dexterity enhances your skill checks such as Acrobatics, Sleight of Hand, and Stealth. Finesse weapons like the dagger, short sword, and rapier, and ranged weapons like the longbow, short bow, and crossbow also benefit from this stat, as it can be used to determine their damage and accuracy. Monks can use dexterity or strength to determine the power of their punches, and like most weapons, the game will choose whatever is higher for determining their damage output. There are many things you may encounter that having a higher dexterity score could help with. If the ground is frozen, such as a pool of water or spilled blood that was frozen by an ice spell, you would require a dexterity check to keep your balance. The popular spell Fireball does full damage to a character who fails a dexterity saving throw. And I should mention that this spell does have friendly fire, except in certain circumstances, such as a sorcerer using meta magic, or an evocation wizard who chooses not to betray their friendships. Dexterity, as I mentioned before, also affects Sleight of Hand, which governs your ability to disable traps, open locks with lockpicks, or to reach in someone's pocket and take what is theirs without them noticing. Though it can also be used in cutscenes like performing a magic trick for children, such as making a coin disappear before their eyes. The Stealth skill is also enhanced through the Dexterity ability score, and the skill is pretty self-explanatory. It determines your ability to stay hidden even when a hostile is looking in your direction, though I recommend you stick to the shadows even with the high stealth score. Acrobatics, like I said before, is usually used to keep your balance and resist being knocked prone in many situations. And of course, Dexterity affects this skill as well. One last important aspect of Dexterity before moving on to the next ability score: Initiative. The higher your Dexterity, the greater the chance you can act before others in combat, as Initiative is determined by rolling a d20 and adding your Dexterity modifier to it. There are other ways to affect Initiative, such as the Alert feat, which adds a straight +5 to your initiative roll, as well as preventing surprise as long as you are conscious, while also preventing creatures that are hidden from gaining advantage on their attack rolls, so they can still get advantage through other means. Constitution. Important for all classes, as it determines your health value and ability to maintain concentration for the spells that require concentration. Constitution does not have any skills associated with it, but saving throws can be common. Constitution can help prevent the poison status effect, which, if you are poisoned, you suffer disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks until the status is cleansed. Each class has their own hit die associated with them, which determines how big their health pool can be. Fighters, for example, have a d10 for their hit die. With a constitution of 10, their constitution modifier would be a +0. I believe at level 1, all classes get their maximum hit die for that level in Baldur's Gate 3. So for this instance, the fighter would have a final HP score of 10 at level 1. If we increase their constitution ability score to 14, making their modifier a +2, their HP would instead be 12. If you decide to later increase your constitution, you do not waste HP, however. In tabletop D&D at least, if you enhance your constitution at a later level, the previous levels receive the new bonus retroactively. It will be as if you always had the constitution modifier in place, and your new HP bonus will reflect that. Most players will probably not want a negative modifier on this ability score. Intelligence. Intelligence is going to be most useful for wizards, though subclasses such as the Arcane Trickster from Rogue and Eldritch Knight for Fighter can benefit from this stat as well, depending on their choice of spells. Intelligence is used to determine the spellcasting ability of wizard spells. Enemies have to make saving throws against your spell DC, which is calculated as 8 plus proficiency bonus plus intelligence modifier. The only way that I am aware of to add damage modifiers using an intelligence score, however, is the empowered evocation class trait that evocation wizards obtain at level 10. It allows you to add your intelligence modifier to one damage roll of any wizard evocation spell that you cast, such as Fireball, Magic Missile, or even the cantrip Firebolt. The skills that intelligence affects are Arcana, which includes trying to figure out information about spells or magical creatures and even magic items. History, which covers past events that happen in the world, or possibly the existence of legendary people, and war knowledge. Nature, for when you are dealing with plants or animals, specifically about information and not trying to calm an animal down. That is determined by the skill Animal Handling. And religion, which covers lore about gods and holy symbols, and may determine your ability to conduct a prayer successfully. I almost forgot Investigation. Investigation checks are used to find hidden objects like a lever behind a crate, which kind of sounds similar to Perception, but it's just different enough. Or examining scratches on the floor to determine that a bookcase is actually movable. An example of another intelligence check that happened in the game for me was when I tried to copy a gesture an NPC was trying to teach my character. Hilariously, I failed the check even though it only had a difficulty of 5. The NPC was frustrated, but continued trying to teach my character the gesture, and they got it on their second try. Wisdom. Clerics, druids, and rangers use wisdom for their spellcasting, while monk also benefits from wisdom. Wisdom is used in addition to dexterity to determine a monk's armor class when unarmored, while also benefiting their save DC for their key features like Stunning Strike. Wisdom affects the skills Animal Handling, Insight, Medicine, Perception, and survival. Animal handling, as mentioned earlier, allows you to calm animals or determine their intent without using the spell Speak with Animals. If Baldur's Gate 3 adds mounts, which is unlikely, I don't see the need for them in this type of game, but that is just based off of Act 1 section. Then this would be the skill they would use to control your mount to avoid being thrown from it. The next wisdom-based skill is Insight. This allows you to pick up on someone lying or hiding something from you. It can help you predict what the person or creature you are interacting with will do next. Medicine is up next, and it will be used for figuring out illnesses so that you can treat NPCs in Baldur's Gate 3. In tabletop D&D, I believe medicine checks are also used for stabilizing a fallen ally. In Baldur's Gate 3, however, I do not believe the help command makes a medicine check. It heals them for 1 HP to get them back to their feet. You can also use Healing Word or throw a potion at a downed ally's body. Just be sure not to hit them directly, as you can cause them to fail their death saving throws. Perception. This is going to be an important skill to have. It lets you spot or hear things that you may otherwise miss. A button hidden in the dark, or maybe a creature trying to ambush you while being obscured on top of a roof. And the last skill that Wisdom has an effect on is Survival. This skill can be used to check for tracks and determine the direction the creature was going. One instance in Baldur's Gate 3 made a survival check to determine that there was an owlbear living in a cave, though I also found signs of goblins in another area that led to an alternative entrance to the grove. Wisdom saving throws can be used to protect yourself against mental intrusion, such as when reading a cursed book. We are down to the last ability score, and I feel like this one will be a popular stat to increase in Baldur's Gate 3, as it allows you to be the face of the party. That's right, Charisma. I actually made a video on how to max out this ability score by level 4, and an alternative way to achieve that same goal in a different, much easier way in a separate video. Just keep in mind that some of these things may change in the full release, as this was all done in early access. Anyway, let's continue. Bards, Paladins, Warlocks, and Sorcerers all benefit from this stat the most. These classes all use their Charisma score to determine spell save DCs. Paladins also use it to fuel their auras, which can give a number of beneficial effects depending on the oath that the Paladin took. And in the case of Warlocks, if they choose certain invocations like Agonizing Blast, they can add their Charisma score to their Eldritch Blast damage. And later on, when choosing their Pact feature, Pact of the Blade is among the choices. This feature allows the Warlock to use Charisma for determining their melee weapons accuracy and damage modifiers, specifically in Baldur's Gate 3, but I think this is going to come later on in tabletop D&D as well. This will be a popular multi-class option for certain classes like Paladin in my opinion. Though there could also be other options depending on what they add to the full release version of the game. Okay, so skill checks. Deception is self-explanatory. Trying to lie your way out of a situation? This is the go-to skill, fueled by your Charisma score of course. Intimidation is just as self-explanatory as deception. If you instead try to scare an NPC, usually through threats and other hostile actions, this is a skill you would use. It is of my opinion that this should be a dual skill. By that I mean, strength could use more skills besides just athletics, and this could be a skill that goes off of your charisma or your strength. That is not the case in tabletop D&D, or this game however. Performance. Playing an instrument or otherwise looking to entertain someone, this is a skill you would use. Persuasion. This is a skill you would roll for when trying to influence someone to come over to your way of thinking. You can negotiate a lower price with merchants perhaps, or defuse a situation that is boiling over. I've actually been doing these videos in an attempt to increase my charisma score in real life. I can mumble sometimes or talk too fast, and I'm trying to fix that. Hopefully I'm making improvements every day in that regard. Well, I hope this has given people who may be new to Dungeons & Dragons or the video game Baldur's Gate 3 some useful information in determining what skills and ability scores they would like to focus on. As always, leave your comments below. I try to read and respond to as many as I can as time allows. Constructive criticism is always welcome. It helps me to focus on aspects I need to improve on. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if that's your thing. Take care and have a good one.